again to my podcast and my YouTube channel. I had a hard time starting this interview today because we were just talking and talking and talking, me and Terry. She's in LA and I'm looking at her beautiful home. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see her home.
Ta-da.
I am so happy to have you here, Terry. I was actually walking. I go to my favorite bookstore. I'm sure you heard of it, Powell's in
Oh, I've been,
Northern.
yeah, I've been
Yeah.
dying to go.
Oh,
Yes.
it's my favorite place in Portland by far. And I always go straight to my everybody. I think everybody does that when they go to Powell's. They go straight to second because it's like four stories of books and a
Oh,
whole block.
wow.
It's just fantastic. So
That's
I
heaven.
was I was there in my favorite area, the psychology area, and I saw your book. Let me just show for those who are watching. Here it is. It's called Modern Madness, and it really helps you understand what living with bipolar disease feels like. And I just grabbed it and said, okay, this is one of those that I have to read, and
Thank
I
you.
could not put it down.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you, Paula.
I was so happy to find your book because we were talking about this Terry Cheney. Oh, let me tell my listeners your name. I'm talking, my guest today is Terri Cheney. She's a bestseller author of three books. She has three books. The one that was a bestseller in a few days is Manic, a memoir, but
Mhm.
she also wrote The Dark Side of Innocence, Growing Up Bipolar, and this one that I just showed, Modern Madness. So they're all talking about the disease and how it expresses itself in her life, right? And her
That's right.
experience with it. But and they're very complementary. We're talking about this because Manic talks about. Well, let me ask you. Let me tell me the difference between these three books
Well,
because they seem to
Manic
complement themselves.
Manic was strictly a memoir. It was about my own experience being an entertainment lawyer representing really high profile clients like Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones, people like that, and being in that environment and all the time keeping hidden the fact that I had severe bipolar disorder. And so it's about my experiences as an adult. And then The Dark Side of Innocence is about what it was like to grow up undiagnosed with bipolar
Mm,
disorder. And Modern Madness really looks at what is it like to live with a person with a mental health condition. What can friends, family, loved ones do, caretakers, caregivers, professionals. I really wanted to expand beyond, it's told through my own stories
mhm,
that have happened to me, but I really wanted to expand the scope in
mhm.
Modern Madness to encompass all those who try so hard to get along with us.
Yes, yes, and it's very heartwarming in a way because I could see that you were making such an effort to look at the other side, right? Because mental illness, I've had depression myself, so you kind of become very locked into yourself,
Yes, you
right?
do.
It's very self-centering. And you made such an effort to say, wow, it's hard to live with me. And here what it may look like and what helps me. What can you do to help? So I think that's to me, that's one of the great values of your book. When I
Thank
was
you.
reading it, because we read a lot of memoirs on how what does it feel like to me. But it's rare that you find a book that says, okay, if you have someone you love who has bipolar, what helps? How can you
Right,
deal with it? How can you
right.
relate to them? Right. And this is what we're going to focus on today. And of course, for this podcast, bipolar disorder is very central to suicide. We know that
Yes, it is.
between 25 and 50% of people with bipolar will attempt suicide. And around 80% of people with this disease will have ideation, will think about suicide at some point in their lives because of the all the ups and downs and the
Right.
highs and lows and of course all the destruction around and all the relationship problems. So I really wanted to bring someone who knows, who feels it, but who also made the effort that you did to write this book. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Great. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so let's start with we're going to look at some concepts because usually I think the general public we only know okay it's bipolar. No, but there's way more into that. We know that we have
Yes.
bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So but we'll look at some other concepts throughout our interview too. Like mixed states, rapid cycling. What does that mean and how can you identify that that's happening? So, can you tell us, please, what is the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2?
Well, it's really very simple. Bipolar 1 is classic mania, where you get very high, euphoric, agitated, even, or you do risky things. That's really what defines mania, is that your judgment goes out the window. So
Mhm.
you have classic mania and mood swings into depression and the mixed state, which we can talk about in a minute. Whereas bipolar 2, you don't have as high a mania. You have what's called hypomania, which is an elevated mood and increased energy. It actually, I enjoy hypomania. I think it's like the best part of being bipolar. But with bipolar 2, that can be followed by bouts of depression. So you don't
Mhm.
get the tremendous highs that you get with bipolar 1. So that's
Mhm.
really the difference.
Yeah. I want to read, you mentioned you love hypomania. I want to read what you wrote, your definition of hypomania. I loved it because I think it was so clear. Hypomania is that exquisite state, one rung below mania, where I feel like I can conquer the world, but I don't try because I don't try to because some vestige of reality still exists in my brain. And
Yeah.
that is really the difference between hypomania and mania, isn't it? Because
Yes.
mania, you don't know, you almost lose touch with reality, right?
Yeah, you don't, at a certain stage in hypomania, you don't even know you're manic. You just are feeling these intense emotions, and you're talking very fast, and you're feeling like you're being pushed or compelled to do things all the time. You don't sleep. I at least don't eat very much. I have a certain awareness now that it's been so many years that I've experienced bipolar disorder. I sort of know when it's coming on, but when I'm in it, I need my friends and family to tell me, I think you're manic, which is a very tough thing for people to do because it's like telling someone you're drunk. You don't want to
Mhm.
hear it. So
Mhm. It's
it's
tricky.
difficult. Yeah, it's
It's
very
tricky.
tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like that you mentioned some of the negative aspects of mania because there is a misunderstanding that mania is this wonderful feeling. Sounds
Right.
more like hypomania, right?
Hypomania is what people are thinking of when they think of that incredibly elevated state where you just can do anything and feel marvelous about yourself. Unfortunately, in mania, you can get very anxious and irritable. Irritability is probably the number one trait that a lot of people have with mania. And again, you do things that are very risky and you spend all your money. God knows I spent all my money many times. And I mean all my money, not just like too
Wow.
much. I mean all of it. So it is not something I look forward to. Hypomania, yes, but mania, no. I will be very careful not to get manic.
Hmm. Terry, when did you first find out that you had bipolar? Was it one of those cases that you were misdiagnosed for many years and then, I
Yes.
mean, how did it happen?
Well, most people are misdiagnosed and don't get a proper diagnosis for about 10 years, which is how it happened with me. I was uh, misdiagnosed with major depression, which made sense because I would only go in and see the therapist when I was really depressed. When I was manic, I thought, I was on top of the world. So why would I need to see a therapist? So,
That's a great point for those who are
yeah,
listening, right?
a lot of people just don't go to therapy when they're manic. You got much more important earth shattering things to do.
Hmm.
So for me, it was during, I got so depressed at one point that I had a series of electroshock treatments called ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. And in the middle of that course of treatment, I got the most manic I've ever gotten in my life. I took a fabulous trip up the coast to Big Sur. This is when I literally spent every penny I had on a deluxe resort up there. And when by the time I came back down and saw my doctors, they realized, okay, this person has got to be bipolar because that was a classic manic episode. So it wasn't until 1994, about 10 years after I was first diagnosed.
Hmm. Let's talk about the diagnosis because this is something that I like to talk about too. Because we tend to think that diagnosis is a scary thing to have, and many people will not even go right to a doctor afraid of the diagnosis. But I think there is another side of diagnosis that we hardly ever talk about, which is the relief and the value of knowing
Tremendous.
what you have.
Being able to put a name to my emotions, my cluster of symptoms, I call it, was so, it was such a turning point in my life because for the first time I didn't feel guilty about my rather extreme thoughts and behaviors. I mean, it was a medical term. Oh my God, two words, bipolar disorder. And it also allowed me to get the kind of treatment I needed. Before, when I was diagnosed depressive, strictly major depression or unipolar depression, they call it, I was given antidepressants only, and that can cause a bipolar person to cycle up into mania. So it's, unless you add a mood stabilizer, you're really not treating the diagnosis properly.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, must be very hard to treat too, because when you think about treating opposites, right?
Right,
How do you find that balance in the middle ground?
right. And it was especially hard for me because I'm a rapid cycler. We were going to talk about that.
Hmm.
Rapid cycling is when you go from mood to mood very quickly. And some people, most people actually have depressive or manic episodes that last months. My heart just goes out to them because that's got to be terrible. My episodes will last for days, or even during the day, I can switch. But it does make it a lot harder to treat because, as I say in the book, it's like chasing the comet's tail. I mean, you're just constantly trying to adjust the medication to the rapid fluctuating mood.
Hmm. How long did it take for the doctors to find at least the first time? Because I'm sure you still have to tweak it
Forever.
along. Yeah, forever. It's
It
but with any mental illness, really, or any disease, really, medications they usually work for a while, and then you always have to change.
I have been on
Ah,
so many different medications, and I, through trial and error strictly, arrived finally at a cocktail that works really well for me. I'm doing better than I've ever done in my life.
mm,
But boy, did it take a lot of years and a lot of
mm,
patience and a
a lot of
really,
pain,
really good doctor.
and a lot of pain too.
Yeah, and a
Yeah,
lot of suffering.
I want to help those because there might be, I'm sure there are people listening because they know someone who is
Right.
bipolar and they want to know how to relate. But maybe some of the listeners are listening, so maybe I am. So I want you to tell me, what were the very repetitive things that people would tell you that now you know, listen, if your friends are telling you this, maybe you should see someone, like the mood swings, or can you do you remember anything that now it's
Sure.
so clear to you that it was
Sure.
the case?
I think one of the key things is the intensity of your emotions. Bipolar people have very, very intense emotions, feel very strongly, about when they're depressed or they're manic. They just feel everything more acutely, I think, than a lot of people do. And you look at daily functioning really to judge if you have a mental illness, I think. Can you How are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you eating too much or too little? Are you sleeping too much or too little? With bipolar disorder, are you taking on a lot of projects all at once? And are you being grandiose and thinking, that your ideas are so important they're going to change the world? I mean, there's a vast number of symptoms, it seems like, but really the important ones are how are you functioning on a day-to-day basis? Are you getting your needs met? Are you able to remember things and make decisions? And how do your loved ones feel about how you're acting? That's the other
Mm,
thing you have to
yeah.
factor in.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm just thinking of words that they might use, and maybe it would be something for you to stop and say, "Wow, maybe I should look at this." So, like, you're so moody, right?
You're so moody. You talk so fast. Why are you talking so fast? Or I can't stay up with you.
Hmm.
I can't understand what you're saying. Now, to me, it's perfectly clear, and my ideas are brilliant. And why don't you understand them? It's very frustrating
Yeah,
because you
yeah.
do make connections in hypomania and mania. You do have this incredible clarity of thought, but people just can't keep up with you.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, the other ones that come up to me and tell me if they make any sense are
mhm.
like you're so irritated, that you're so
Yes.
unreliable or moody and unreliable, and yeah,
Why don't
I never know who I'm going to meet.
Right. Right,
Yeah.
and that's very true. Or why aren't you returning my messages, my texts, or my emails?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
you tend to isolate when you get depressed. And just really, if people are starting to tell you that you don't seem to be acting the way you were before, I think you need to listen and look at what's going on with yourself. I find charting my mood to be extremely helpful. I've done it online, but I also do it just simply on a calendar. Felt good today, felt depressed,
Mm,
felt angry.
yeah.
It really helps to see the patterns of
Oh,
those
that's a great
moods.
tip. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
a great tip. Just write it down and then maybe look back last month or the
Oh,
last two
the
months.
the online mood trackers will keep track of it for you and let your doctor see like you had 14 days of euphoria,
Wow.
or 7 days feeling like you couldn't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you do have to pay really close attention to yourself, which is something I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with. You have to be
Yeah.
watching all the time with bipolar disorder.
But also be, I don't know, have a little bit of self-awareness too, to know
Oh,
that
you need a huge amount of self
huge, right?
awareness.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but that's what I thought. I mean, you have to really do that. I mean, to be able to look at yourself and to be
That's
aware that your mood is affecting everybody else. And I'm
yes.
sorry, but you have to pay attention to that.
That's why therapy, I think, is helps so much
Mm,
because you get an outsider's opinion of how you're acting and presenting yourself. But yes, you need to learn your triggers. For me, for example, financial issues. I really need to be careful if I'm having financial problems or relationship problems because I know they're a big trigger for my depressions.
mm, yeah, because it makes you feel like hopeless. And here I am again in this situation. And
And often things that happen to you, like let's say you have a car crash, well, you feel really bad about that, right? But that's not depression. It can spiral into depression if you don't take care of your emotions. So
mm, yeah.
what is just circumstance can become a chemical
Hmm.
issue. The
Hmm.
brain can actually sort of start to go haywire on you if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
take
I want to talk about depression, but I just want to just stay a little bit more on the
sure.
mania, because I think depression is more talked about and it's out there, it's been out there, and there is a little bit less stigma too. And I think with mania, there are many misconceptions, and I often think that mania I mean, both are very destructive, but mania
Yeah.
can be so destructive to your relationships.
And yet people are somewhat jealous of it or envious,
Yeah,
I should say. I
yeah.
often get asked, what's it really like to be manic? And there's this sort of quality to the question, like,
Can I
but
take a
if
pill
I,
and do that for
yeah,
2 days?
how do I do it too? You know, you don't want to do it. Take my word for it. You don't want to be manic. It just isn't worth it. You're going to wreck relationships. You're going to spend too much money. I can guarantee you. You may abuse substances more,
Hmm.
um, and you won't sleep, and that's horrible too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The word that you mention in the book a lot is risky. It's
Risky, yes,
very risky.
yes, and sexuality just
Mm.
becomes very problematic because strangely enough, in your early stages of mania, you're extremely attractive to the rest of the world because you're exuding this
Of
confidence
course,
and
yeah.
this charm and this, this just sense of being on top of the world. And people want to be around that. I have something I call the elevator test, where
Hmm.
if I get into a crowded elevator and people start talking to me out of the blue, or I start talking out of the blue, I know something's up with my mood because the
Wow.
charisma is just off the charts. And
Mm.
I know that sounds really good, but that will morph into something not so good where you're turning
Hmm.
people off because you're constantly interrupting them and you won't stop talking, and you get angry, and again the word irritable comes up a lot.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing to me to think of all the things around you that you pay attention now that you have all these tricks, right? When
Yes.
okay, if I get into the elevator and you ask, I love to read that. I think it's a great tip. I mean, you
Yeah.
ask your friends, please tell me.
Yes, yes, you have to. I actually suggest that people, when a bipolar person is not manic or depressed, when they're just being quote normal, I think it's a good idea for their loved ones to have a talk with them about, what do I do when you get manic, and
Hmm.
actually have the bipolar person say on in writing, it's okay to tell me I'm manic,
Hmm.
because that gives, or it's okay to call my doctor, and of course let the doctor know ahead of time. But you can't take advantage of that. You can't
Of course.
misuse that trust. It's very important. I mean, I just beg people not to misuse that trust because
Mm,
it's a really hard thing to do, to allow someone the permission
mm,
to
yeah,
call you on your moods.
yeah. Have you faced a lot of stigma with the disease, and do you think the books helped?
Well, I'll tell you, I faced more self stigma, I think, than public stigma. I have always been a perfectionist, and I've been very hard on myself. And yes, I've had public stigma. I dated a psychiatrist, for example, that told me I had too much baggage. And he was a little warped personally, I think. But I've had I've had people criticize my writing by saying, you talk too much about suicide. Why don't you just go ahead and do it? I mean, terrible
Wow.
things like that. But on the whole, I've been amazed that the world has been so kind to me since I came out of the bipolar closet. They've been encouraging, and a lot of people
Mm,
identify with what I've gone through, even if they're not bipolar. Um, there's been so much praise and appreciation
mm,
for talking about this subject that I really feel like I'm fortunate when it comes to stigma.
mhm, yeah. The other thing that I would love to hear from you, you say that you have, it's another tool that you use. It's like a cheat sheet, right?
My
That
manic
you,
cheat
yeah,
sheet.
yeah. Can
Yes.
you mention a few things because I think they can be very helpful.
Sure. I happen to have my book right here. Let's see if I can.
And then
I
we can, dive into depression and how that,
sure,
and of course, suicide. It's very important to talk about the fact that you attempted suicide a few
yes.
times and what
I
else.
actually carry my manic cheat sheet around in my car, and I had it in my briefcase and in my car. And I wrote it in the book because it is so helpful to recognize when I start to do these things. So, for example, I say, don't change into something sexier. Wear granny panties and flats. Don't make friends with strangers. They're strangers. Don't drink anything but iced tea. Uh, Lipton's, not Long Island. Don't get naked except to shower alone. And don't shave your legs. I mean, these things will keep me from going into hypersexuality.
Yes.
Don't try to beguile attractive men or attractive women or cops. Don't pull out your credit card for any reason. That's a key one,
Mm.
except if necessary to post bail. Don't call or text or email ever, except as noted for bail. This is one that I've had to use a lot. Don't cut your hair short. You aren't Audrey Hepburn. I always want to get a poodle cut, or pixie cut rather. Don't quit your day job. Don't follow your bliss. And what I mean by that is stay safe.
Mm.
Stay Stick to the familiar and you'll be a lot
Yeah.
safer.
Yeah, it's great for women because hypersexuality is a factor.
And it's like I said, you're very charismatic, so you get hit on a lot. And you
Mm.
need to, and you, on the other hand, are, hitting on people a lot. So it's important to avoid those temptations if you can.
Well, thank you. Thank you for talking about that. Let's talk about
Sure.
depression now.
Okay.
So, how does how do you feel when you have depression? And one of the things that you say in your book is, "Oh, please don't tell us to just get out of bed."
Oh,
Because I know I've had depression, and I totally hear you. I was reading a book. I said yes,
it's so
because these,
hard to hear
and you
that.
say, here's the thing that nobody tells you. That is just for moderate depression. People will
Right.
get out of bed, but sometimes that's not the case. And
Or exercise.
getting out of bed
Exercise.
is
Yes.
huge for us.
Yes.
So can you just walk us through that and give my listeners just a feel of what
Sure.
helps and what doesn't?
Well, I'll tell you the thing. I write a blog for Psychology Today, and I wrote one about my inability to move during depressions, and it got the biggest response of any blog I'd ever written because there's a term for it, for this slowing down of the physical and mental processes. And in my case, it actually becomes physical paralysis where I simply can't make my body move the way it needs to. And that's called psychomotor retardation. It helps so much to know those two words, psychomotor retardation, because it is a scientific fact that
Hmm.
you just have difficulty moving. So getting in the shower, it's hard. Just daily tasks, doing the dishes, combing your hair. Um, as I wrote in Modern Madness, laundry can make me suicidal.
Hmm.
It just
Yeah.
becomes too difficult to move and to plan and to think and breathe. So it's a very, very debilitating state. I feel like there's an elephant sitting on my chest.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, it helps to name it, right?
It's
You, yeah.
incredibly important. And I think the thing that helps the most for me is to say it's depression talking
Hmm.
because you're not able in depression really to be rational about your thoughts. They're very negative, they're very self-defeating. And when you can recognize that it's depression talking, you realize, okay, maybe this isn't the absolute truth, that I'm going to feel this way forever and I'm never going to be loved and the world hates me. maybe that isn't really true. Maybe that's depression talking, and depression
Mhm.
is a big fat liar.
Yeah, and also the fact that, especially for you, you've been, as you said, you're a rapid cycler, but you've been through this cycle so many times
Right.
that it helps knowing that okay, this will pass.
This will pass is a very important thing to hear from your friends, actually, because when you're in depression, you feel it's going to last this way forever. You can't
Mm.
imagine ever feeling better. And when you have friends that you trust, that you've let in to be your support team, that say to you, I love you, this will pass, that just can make all the difference in the world. But you have to,
Mhm.
again, you have to trust these people to be telling you the truth.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the compassion, right, and the understanding.
Yes,
Again, you mentioned the book. I think this is the most cited book in history of books. The War. What is it? Something of the Art of War. The
the
Art of
art of
War, and you
war.
mentioned know thy enemy, right?
Yes.
So education helps. It helps those who have the disease, but it also helps those who are around them.
I think education is so much easier than it used to be. There's no excuse
There's no
for
excuse anymore. Yeah.
if you were I say in the book, if you were dating a girl from Spain, you'd learn a few words of Spanish, right? I mean, so learn the symptoms. It isn't that hard so that you can spot them and help your friends or help yourself.
Hmm.
Very important.
Yeah. Another concept that I would love to hear you explain is mixed states. What
Okay.
does that mean? And that's part of the disease, and this is something that we hardly ever hear about.
Can I add one more thing I just thought of
Sure.
about helping depression?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll get to mixed
Sure.
states.
Okay.
5 words that are like a mission of mine. Instead of giving advice to people as we were talking, it's so hard to hear you should do this, you should do that when you can't. So if you really want to help your depressed friend or loved one, just say, tell me where it hurts. 5 little words. Tell me where it hurts.
Yeah.
But then you have to sit back and really listen. And
Mm.
it isn't always easy to hear what a depressed person is going to tell you. And you'll want to argue with them and you'll want to, make them feel better. But by saying, tell me where it hurts, you allow the person to let some of the darkness out of them into the
Mm.
light. And I
Yeah.
can't tell you what a difference that's made in my life. Tell me where it
I
hurts.
love it. I love that you say
It's so
that.
brave.
Yeah, no, because I mentioned, I don't know if you've read any books by Dr. Edwin Schneidman.
No.
He's known as the father of suicidology. He was the first person to study suicide by reading letters and suicide notes,
Mhm.
and he was the guy here actually in LA.
Oh, is that
So
right?
yeah, he opened the first suicide prevention center in the US. And I
Wow.
had the immense pleasure and privilege to interview him for my book,
Wow.
like
How
2 years
wonderful.
before he died, because he was turning 90. And one of the things that I always mention when I talk about Dr. Edwin Schneidman is that he talks about that. So when you talk to a suicidal person, there are only two questions to ask. One is, where does it hurt? And the second one is, how can I help?
Yes. How
So
can I
when I
help?
read that in your book, I said, wow, maybe she read him.
No, I wish I had. I
Yeah,
wish I had. I did.
his books are great. There's one I would recommend. It's called The Suicidal Mind.
Okay.
So it's really it's
When did he practice?
um well, he opened the first suicide prevention in the 60s.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
interviewed him around 2007, so he was still alive. I think he died in 2008 or
Okay.
9. But fascinating man,
Thank
but
you.
he and
I'll look that up.
yeah, and that's what he said. And one of the things that, you read books and books, and there are always these things that stay with you, and
Mhm.
that is one of the things that stayed, and it helped me so much when I
Yes.
talk to someone and say, okay, here's what helps.
Yes.
No judgment, no
No
shoulds,
judgment. Just listen.
just
And it's hard.
listen.
It's
Yeah.
hard, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
so worth it.
and also understand that sometimes they might disappear on you. They will, and that can be very hurtful. I had a friend do that to me a couple of
I
years
did
ago.
too. I did too. It really hurt. It
It
still
really
hurts.
hurts.
It
And
still
she
hurts.
just
Yeah.
now, after 2 years, called me like 3 weeks ago apologizing. I said, wow, that took 2 years.
Wow. That's a
It is,
long
yeah,
time.
it's a long time. I mean, but it hurts. It's hard to understand, and
Yes.
you feel left out and you feel rejected. But understand that sometimes they do need time.
Well,
And
I have a tip for that too that has helped me. When I start to go into a depression, I write the people that are closest to me that I think I'm going into a depression. I may not
Mhm,
be able to talk for a little while, and then it's their responsibility to come back with some encouragement or, just to know.
mhm.
But anyway, about mixed states, I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
digress.
let's go. Let's go to mixed state now.
Mixed
What does
states
that mean?
are the worst parts of depression combined with the worst parts of mania. So you feel all the self loathing and hatred and negativity that you feel in depression with the agitation and increased energy and risky behavior.
Irritability,
Yeah,
irritability. So
irritability.
it's
Yeah.
kind of the worst of both worlds
And
put
the way
together.
I know that I've got that I'm having a mixed state, and they're my least favorite part of bipolar disorder. They are hell to live in. Is I feel like smashing glass for some reason. If if I ask myself, do I feel like smashing glass at the moment? Okay, I'm in a mixed state. So what I
Mhm.
went and did was I went to the Goodwill and bought a ton of cheap crockery. So now I
So
have
you can
something.
smash it.
I go out in my garage and I smash the crockery. Yeah, it helps. It's a little silly, but it helps. But I think the better term for a mixed state is agitated depression. I think that
Yeah, it sounds
really
horrible.
it is, and it's very hard to treat. And I have to keep telling myself this will pass, because it can
Yeah,
be just
yeah,
exhausting.
yeah, yeah. Terry, let's talk about suicide. I know that you have attempted a few
Yes,
times suicide. And I was wondering, one of the questions that I had was, you've been dealing with this disease most of your life. I mean, since you were a child, right? You already have the tools. I mean, was it before you had all the knowledge and all the tools and the experience that you attempted suicide? Or is it just, I mean, what takes you to that state of hopelessness?
for me, it was my father's death. It
Mm,
was unbearable, and we were very, very close, and he was very sick with lung cancer. And it was just a terrible time. I would like to wipe 1997 off the map, because I attempted several times after he died. And I think I think that one of the reasons I don't seem to get suicidal now is that I finally realized, after surviving my attempts, there must be some reason why I survived.
mhm,
And what could that reason be? And I think it's that I need to be around to bear witness to the difficulties of bipolar disorder and the terror of being suicidal and just what people go through, when they
mhm.
are struggling with mental health. It gave me a great deal, ironically, of meaning and purpose to my life to have survived my attempts, because
Mhm.
I shouldn't have. I should not be here today.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard, and when we talk about risk factors, that's one of the things that I often bring up, because we say that prior attempts is the number one
Yes.
risk factor, right? But sometimes it can be, and that's how complicated suicide is,
You know,
because for some people it is the opposite.
I'd like to talk about that point, because it's something I don't think is known well enough, that when you start to feel better after a terrible depression is the scariest, riskiest time for
Mm,
suicide. It's not when well, I can't generalize to everybody, but it's not when you're so deep in the depression that you can't move,
yeah.
because when you're that depressed, you can't even think about killing yourself or, planning or acting on a plan. But when you start to emerge out of a depression, your friends and family need to really watch you closely,
Mhm.
because then you have the energy to act on those dark impulses. So I think it's one of the reasons a lot of suicides are missed, or the risk of it is missed because people think, oh, well, they're getting better. They were getting better. What could have
Yeah.
happened? And so
Yeah.
it's very important to look behind the facade.
Yeah, you say never be fooled by a smile, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Never be
Y-
fooled by a smile.
Yeah,
Watch closely.
I talk about that on my course on how to help a suicidal person.
Good.
One of the things that I mentioned is do not believe that it's depression that kills you. It's usually
Right.
when you're coming out of it.
I'm so glad you talked about that. I don't think enough people know about it.
No, no, because of the association. When you read, it's all about the numbers, right? You go online and say depression, I mean mental illness and suicide, and then you first thing you're going to see is the one number one associated is depression.
Right.
So people just assume that if you're depressed,
Right.
you are that's when you are at risk. It's actually when you're coming out because you have
Right.
the enough energy to
And
attack it.
enough, you can plan, you can
Mhm.
focus. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the episodes that you mentioned in your book, and I want to bring that up because it speaks to the pride in how hard it is to deal with this kind of disease. And I remember that you were taken to the hospital for whatever reason you really didn't know. Maybe it was a mix of the drugs that you were taking, right? The medication, you got the numbers wrong or something, and you were taken to a hospital and they wrote down suicide attempt.
Yep.
And how angry you were and said, "No, I have not attempted in 10 years. Nobody's gonna take that away from me." I
Right.
love
I
that.
was I was livid. That I think what happened is I took my evening medications twice, and they're sedating, and I fell, and I had to call 911 because I kept passing out. And I could understand why they would think it was a suicide attempt because I do have a lot of pills. But boy, I when I was able to talk again, I grabbed every hospital attendant or nurse or doctor I could find
Mhm.
to say I did not try to kill myself, because I don't do that anymore. I needed
Mhm.
to be
Yeah, yeah,
clear with myself, clear with the world, that
yeah.
I do not want to be thought of as
I
suicidal.
don't want that label, right? To
Right.
just be define who I am and
I've worked too hard to
hmm
get where I am, and I
yeah.
don't want to lose that wonderful shining accomplishment of not having tried to
Yeah.
kill myself.
Yeah, and you say that at the end, I mean, you saw that it was kind of hopeless that they did not believe you, and you just use your lawyer card, right? Okay, that should do it.
I'm a lawyer, and it
In
did. It
America,
worked.
that solves all
It
problems. If you
worked. It was
say you're a
so funny.
lawyer, forget it. People are
So
not
they but
messing
they
up with it.
changed the records, so it said unintentional overdose, and I was so proud of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course you are. You fought and you've been doing so much. Terry, do you have anything else, any other tip? Maybe to those who are listening and they are afraid of the diagnosis or go to the doctor. What would you say to this person who maybe now is realizing that they might?
I think I would tell people that the world is changing when it comes to mental health. And I think we were discussing earlier, Paula, that I think during COVID, the world is beginning to see the importance of mental health because people are experiencing depression and anxiety at a rate we've never seen. And the suicide rate is skyrocketing for young people, and they're
Mhm.
having such a hard time. Um, 1 in 5 Americans now takes some form of mental health medication or has a diagnosis, and you're not alone. You're not bizarre. You are one of the many people who is struggling with a physical condition, because
Mhm.
mental health is physical health. The two
Mhm.
are inextricably linked.
Yes.
I mean, the brain is only a 3.5 pound organ. I think Robin Williams said that. It's just another organ. And if it's not functioning properly, you can get help. There
And
is help,
it's interconnected. It's everywhere. Your brain is
very
in
much
every
so.
single inch of your body.
Yes. There's a good reason it's attached.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is a disservice that we've all done. I mean, to
Yes.
separate mind and body,
Correct.
it just doesn't make any sense. And thankfully now I think people are realizing that, and even physicians are realizing that it's
Yes.
not helpful. It hasn't been helpful to separate, right?
Yeah, the term mental illness makes me angry because it should just be illness.
Yeah, period. Yeah,
It is illness.
yeah. Do you have any more tips on relating to someone who's bipolar? I have some here. Let me look. You write, don't try to make it all better, right? Just let me talk about my pain. That goes to, how can
Right.
I,
Not
how,
giving
where does it hurt?
advice.
Yeah, where does it hurt, right?
Right. Just
Don't,
tell me where it hurts.
yeah, don't throw platitudes, no shoulds. Never think that your diagnosis will define us. Your
Right.
diagnosis will
There's so
define
much
us.
more to me than just being
Hmm.
bipolar.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love when you say, let the depressed be depressed.
Right. It will pass eventually, but while it's there, you need to respect it and
Hmm.
not try to talk the person out of it. Frankly, it's rude to say you're
Yeah.
not depressed when you are
Yeah.
depressed. It's unkind
Yeah.
and it
Nobody
doesn't
says you
help.
don't have COVID when you have a positive,
Right.
right? Nobody
Or let's
says
say you
that.
have a cold sore. Nobody says you're making it up. You have a cold. You don't have a cold sore. I mean,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's something in your body that is not functioning right.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Terry,
Thank you.
for
This was
being here
lovely.
with us. It's been great, and I'm sure it's going to help so many people.
I hope so. Because really, there is so much help out there now.
There is. Yeah, I'm so glad, and that's unfortunately all the disaster and the tragedy of COVID. That's one of the things that COVID did, was to bring up more awareness to mental illness. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Paula. I enjoyed this. Bye bye.
You too.